Okay, how much time do we have? Till 10 or 11:30? There's more seats in the front. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seats here. 3 there. And there's a rocking chair if you really want to. That's the chair you want. So thank you for coming. I want to just get an idea. Who here is the parent of a toddler? Who here is the parent of a newborn, a little baby? They're home. They don't get to go out much. How about teenager? Not too many. Okay. And who here works professionally with children? Wow. What do you do?
I'm a social worker with social services.
Cool.
Teacher.
Teacher. What age?
All elementary.
Beautiful. Who else said they work with children?
Parent Resource Center. I work with parents with kids with special needs.
Beautiful.
And help them figure out how to help their kids.
Cool.
I'm a peds nurse
Wow. Where?
for Baltimore County.
Oh boy. You? No? That's it? No other workers that work with kids? All right. I don't have an expertise. No parent is an expert except raising their own children. So there are hardly any right or wrong ways to do this, but my idea today is to give you some hints about positive discipline. What does that mean? What do you think a good definition of positive discipline would be? Take it.
Right?
Yeah. You don't have to. You can pass.
That's all right. I'll go with it. Disciplining only what you want them to do? Like commenting maybe, almost like catching them being good?
Ah, I like that. That's good. Anyone
Is
else?
that it or no?
Yeah, it could be. There's no right. It's not a A, B, C, D, and A, B, and C are wrong, and D is right. That's good.
One cookie instead of 2.
Negotiation.
It means there's a conversation, and why something might have been wrong, and then turn it into something positive. What's a positive outcome from a discipline thing? When you've had to discipline your child, what would you consider a positive outcome of that interaction?
Changing behavior.
Changing behavior in a positive way.
Yes.
Because if you do, you may change the behavior, but that has its own consequences, right? Okay.
That I didn't yell at them.
That you didn't lose your cool is a positive outcome for you.
Everybody.
For everybody. I've heard you. No. I've seen you. No. Were you going to say something?
No, I said correction.
Okay, good. So let's start there and see how far we get. I am not an expert. I've raised 3. My oldest is 37, married with a 3-year-old. My next is 36, married with a 2-year-old and one about to be born. And I have a 22-year-old. So we waited 15 years. We were the youngest parents, and then we were the oldest parents at the PTA meetings. It was very, very interesting. We saw all these old people with gray hair, and then we became the old people with gray hair. And we raised our children different based on us being more mature and less stressed a little bit. Yet the younger one was raised as an only child. She's a girl. The boys are boys. And it's interesting to see them raising their own children now. So I don't know whether we did it right or wrong. When I told my daughter that I was going to be talking about positive discipline, she started laughing on the phone. She said, "You never disciplined me. You're a pushover." So I don't know. I don't know if there's a right or wrong way. Your kids will always knock you down to size if you think you're too serious about yourself. So here's what we want to talk about. First of all, what is the definition of discipline? Does age matter? What can you do to help your child behave? And again, how can you get help from your pediatrician? I'm a pediatrician or family doc or anybody that's good at this. How can you get help when you need help about these things? So there they are. There's too much light here. He's married with this 3-year-old. He's more of the disciplinarian than his wife is. He's got a 2-year-old little girl, and she does more of the discipline when it's necessary, and she's just the spoiled 22-year-old now. She thinks. and that's us. All right. So I think when you talk about positive discipline, you want to create an environment so that you're not just doing when your child is bad, but how do you set up the world so that your child is good? That's my idea of positive discipline. So if you notice, what did I put down here? This contraption helps a 6 or 8-month-old be good, right? Because that 8-month-old can still be stimulated and have fun, but be safe so that you don't have to discipline at all. That's the ideal world. That doesn't work well for your 9-year-old, right? You can't do that anymore. But theoretically, you can set up the 9-year-old's world, at least the part that you have a say in, so that it's still a safe world for that child. All right. So the age does make a difference. Children understand the world differently at different ages, so they need different kind of rules and choices depending on what age they are. All right, if you have a 17-year-old who's done something that was against the rules that you guys agreed upon, you're going to do something different than if it's a 3-year-old, right? Obviously. Okay, so that is the 3-year-old boy. His name is Gael. Anyway, first 6 months, you can't spoil a baby. Now that's hard because some babies cry all the time and you say that kid is spoiled. It's just their disposition. The kids at this age only know one thing. They know how to cry when they're not happy. So the only thing they know how to do, that's their only reaction mechanism. You can't spoil them at that age. They can't make any choices. You have to figure it out, whether it's because they're hungry or wet or they have a hair wrapped around their toe or they have strep. You can't tell. You can hear maybe they have different cries when you're good at it, but that's the only way the child reacts. So there really is no discipline for those first 6 months, so give it up. There are grandparents that will say all the time, that kid is spoiled, that kid is bad. Don't say, those are not the right words to use. They can't help it. So that's Isadora. She lived in Philadelphia. I came in on the train and I greeted her. Do you see what she's doing? How's she exploring my face? With her hand. That's what kids at that age do. All right, so she was 6 months at the time. You know that 6-month-olds explore, but they can't move around yet too much, so they explore with their hands. And it's a video, and she's laughing hysterically. It always makes me laugh. All right, so what about 6 months to 2 years? So what happens is they start to learn to control their body. So what do? First they do their hands, then their arms, then they start crawling backwards before they crawl forwards. And that's when they start getting in trouble. The more they can do, the more trouble they can get into. What do they want to do? They want to hurt themselves. They want to kill themselves. They want to climb over your toilet, get into your medicine cabinet. They want to stick their fingers in your electric sockets. So what's your job? Your job is to not let them kill themselves. So what you're doing is you're creating an environment that's safe for them, right? That's what we do at all ages. It's more metaphysical as they get older and less real. But at this age, what they want to do is get into things, rip them, run. The more power they have, the more dangerous they are, right? They don't know what's safe and what's not. So the thing to do is try your best to create a safe environment. Get rid of the drugs you don't need in the medicine cabinet, right? Plug those holes. Make sure the electric things aren't easily accessible for them to chew on, right? If you have a dog, the 2-year-old and the dog, right? You know, that's a problem, right? So you're creating an environment that's okay, as much as you can. Sometimes the kids win, by the way. All right. So what do? Look at this picture of Izzy and my daughter, Penina. What do you see here? Can you see? Where's this little 6-month-old sitting?
Gated in.
She's gated in. So that's protective for her. There's no discipline necessary. What else? What's my daughter doing? She's sitting in there with her. Now, that's not always possible. But if you can get down on your hands and knees and get in there, you can distract when things are bad. This is why we tell parents to get on the floor, look around their house, see what kind of danger the kids can get into and try to avoid it. All right? If she does something wrong at that age, you pick her up and turn her, and she goes back on her merry way. There's no fight, there's no discipline. It's just what you do. Well, you see that? I don't know if you can see, these are those squishy carpet blocks. Can you see back there? That's in case she toddles. What does toddling mean? What does a toddler mean? Toddle means you don't walk right and you fall over. That's what it means to toddle, right? So her floor is safe, right? And there's nothing in here that she could hurt herself with. You're creating an environment that's safe for the child. No discipline involved. All right, now we're in trouble. Because that's Gael, and he's 3, he's at our house. He's in a different environment now, right? He's got a backyard here. He lives in Brooklyn. There's no backyards in Brooklyn, at least where he lives. He lives near the projects, so there's no backyard. He's got a gate here. He's got a porch here. He's in trouble, right? He can get in trouble because the rules that his parents made in Brooklyn are different than the rules he needs in Northwest Baltimore. All right, so now we're starting to get into trouble. They don't understand rules much at this age or can't generalize from one to another. This little 3-year-old is going to be hard to understand the rules. So where he lives, he's not allowed to take his scooter into the street in Brooklyn. Bad idea, right? Okay? We have 100 yards from the back of the house to the front of the house. He can do his scooter for 100 yards. But what can he do? What would he understand? He still can't go in the street. Okay? So you can use the same rules that a 3-year-old has in one place. Some rules are transferable and some are not, depending on the child and situation. It's getting a little more subtle, right? Okay. It's hard for them to figure out that the same thing will happen more than once. That's a hard thing. So the dog bit the kid for putting his fingers in the dog's mouth, all right? How do you prevent that from happening again? Some kids, yeah, they understand that was bad and that got them in trouble. Some won't. They'll keep going back at the dog, and you have to remove the dog and the child from each other. For sure. Oh, baby. Now, this is important. In 3-year-olds, fantasy is not different than reality. So they'll tell you all kinds of stuff, and that's their real world. And it's hard to how many of your kids have had an imaginary friend? Right?
Apparently I have a 3rd child named Violet.
So what does Violet do?
She's normally resting on the sofa, or she's already gone to bed.
I see.
But he tells people he has a sister named Violet.
Nice.
Nope.
And it's real.
Yeah.
And you go with it after a while. You don't say to him, there is no Violet. What are you, crazy? Oh, that's your job? What do you say?
Or sometimes I'll get, Violet got ready for bed.
That's funny. That's good. I like it. So well, maybe there isn't a, right.
Turn it into something,
Hey, you smart guy. Okay, so maybe you need to use that fantasy, but the fantasy is really reality for the kids, and especially if they're watching cartoons and all kinds of stuff. But 3-year-olds, the world still revolves around them, so it's really hard to teach concepts of global morality to a 3-year-old, or what would be a relevant, help me, what would be an example where it would probably not work for a 2 or 3-year-old? When
World peace.
world peace, but in their life, let's say they're getting in trouble at school for hitting a particular child. It's tough to explain to that 3-year-old that when you hit that child, it makes him feel sad, okay, because all they're thinking about is themselves. So you have to think about how you would explain that to this 3-year-old where the world really revolves around them. Everything is concrete. It's what you touch. It's what you feel. It's what you see. If you can't touch, feel it, or see it, it doesn't exist to a 3-year-old. So consequences of behavior have to be in those 3 things: touch, feel, see. Make sense? All right, so positive reinforcement. This is hard to do because what people should do, we don't always have to reinforce it, but the way to make a child's life positive is to keep reinforcing positive things as they happen. It's really great that you sat down when I asked you to. Or that was really good that you were so nice to so-and-so. Or you ate your vegetables. That's wonderful. Thank you for doing that. Make there be a lot of positive stuff going on so that there is a different tone when you have to say something negative. If your world is bland and then negative, you get tuned out. If your world is positive and then you say something negative, the sharp contrast is heard by the child. Hard thing to do, because most of us weren't raised in homes where you get praised all the time. But good classrooms are like that. Are there any teachers here? Good classrooms do that. There's a lot of reinforcement for positive behavior, and then when you change your tone, people actually hear it, right? Okay. All right. Now, you also want to be realistic. You don't want to ask your kids to do stuff they can't do. That's a lesson for all their life, as we put them in piano lessons when their fingers don't move too good, you know, or voice lessons when they can't sing, or who knows what, lacrosse when they lacrosse their feet and fall over, you know. So give children, find out what they do well, give them chances to succeed, and praise them for it. Then you're creating a positive environment. If you need to punish, it should be effective, meaningful, and relevant to what it was about. I'll give an example. So my second used to torment my oldest. So he would do stuff like, my oldest had his own room, and they were like 6 and 5, and the 5-year-old would torment the old one by saying, the 6-year-old said, "You can't come in my room. I don't allow it," and we let that happen. So the 5-year-old would say, "I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out, I'm in, I'm out." So what we figured would be effective punishment was we would take the 5-year-old and put him at the top of the stairs for 2 minutes and be socially isolated for 2 minutes. What he did was socially wrong with our rules in our home. Therefore, you had to sit here and be socially isolated for 2 minutes. That was terribly effective. He hated it. He would say, "Not the stairs." We weren't hurting him. We weren't doing it for 3 hours. It was for 2 minutes. But those 2 minutes reinforced that the behavior that he was doing was inappropriate in our home. And it worked. So if you need to discipline, find something that's immediate, relevant, and to the point of what was done. All right. Now, school-age kids are different. Once you get to kindergarten, what's the difference between pre-K and first grade?
Oh, it's all about the rules.
It's all about the rules.
Somebody else has to follow the rules too.
It's all about the rules. And they understand, and they follow them if they're consistent and make sense to them. And they're applied to everybody. So rules are what kids, school-age kids, love and need. And they understand, as long as the rules make some sort of sense. But in school-age kids, you could say, we're doing this rule because of this. So we're enforcing your bedtime at 9 o'clock because if you stay up to 9:15, you're too tired to get dressed in the morning. That's a rule that makes sense, consistent. We're turning off electronics at 7 o'clock so that you can get your bath and get ready for school and be in bed by 8 o'clock. That makes sense, it's consistent, it can be done across settings. Those are rules. Kids do well with rules till they become teenagers. Then the rules are made to be stretched and broken and changed. But anyway, this is my daughter in 2nd grade, and the rules were great for her. She did fine in 2nd grade. But if somebody else has a different rule, that's the 2nd graders will say, I go to bed at 8. Why can my friend Marissa go to bed at 8:30? Right? Don't we have the same rule? No. There are rules for this house and that. We have problems in that we all were brought up by, couples are brought up by different families, right? With different rules and different expectations, and then we have to come together and make up a plan that works. A couple breaks up, and then there's new people brought in. Now it's 4 sets of rules. So this is very hard, but kids want rules. They want them consistent, and they want to understand why. School-aged kids. Now, consequences is what you want. You break the rule, there are consequences. The hardest thing is not to get emotional when your kids break the rules. It's the hard, right? I am the professor of pediatrics. I can tell you that what you want to do is calm down before you give your discipline. Very hard to do because they've done something that's upset you. So one of the things to say, if you have older children, is what you did upset me. when you did this, it made me feel like that. That's a statement that automatically puts things in context for you, because you have to explain to yourself before you tell others why that made you upset. When you did this, it made me feel like that. Kids understand that. By the way, you can do that to your bosses too. When your bosses do something, or your students, or whoever, or your friends, or your spouses, when you did this, it made me feel like that, is a very good statement that certainly school-age kids understand. But the punishment that you do has to be commensurate to what they did, realistic and timely. Good? Can anybody give me an example of this working for them? No one's ever disciplined their children in this room. Or give me a story of where it went terribly wrong, and maybe we can help figure out what to do next. Anybody want to take a stab?
My toddler likes to throw food.
Cool.
So he's very upset.
Is he good at it?
He's very good, but he also likes using the dustpan and the broom. So sometimes we wonder if the discipline is a reward for bad behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So
Do you guys ever laugh when he does it?
I'm sure we do, because we have older children as well.
And it's hilarious. It really is hilarious. So the 2-year-old granddaughter, Izzy, the one who lives in Houston, she fell down. She's very, very verbal. She wasn't even 2. She's toddling. She falls down. She says, "Shut it." So the parents were videoing it because it was cute watching her learn to walk. And then when she said this, you hear them howling in the background because it's hilarious. But there's no discipline there. So how did they extinguish that word from her vocabulary? They had to figure out how not to react to it. And then it disappeared. Okay? So your toddler it's normal for toddlers to throw food. So how do you get the toddler to stop throwing food? Any ideas? First thing you have to do is not laugh. Or not take out something that's fun, like a broom to clean it up. That's fun for a 2-year-old. How do you extinguish that behavior? Hard to do, especially if you have a nice house and a beautiful rug underneath. Who would put a beautiful rug in a house with a 2-year-old? Maybe at grandma's house. That's when it happens. At grandma's house, where they have nice rug and they haven't had a 2-year-old in 30 years in the house, right? So it's very hard to extinguish it, but don't reward it. Okay?
I have a teenager. I have a challenge coming up with immediate consequences.
Mhm.
I can never think of what's appropriate on that spot.
So what you do is you negotiate before the thing happens. You guys have a family meeting and you say, we need to figure out what's important for you. These are our rules. Or you negotiate the way we behave in this house. And when things go wrong, tell me what you think would be appropriate. That's an anticipatory discussion, which is fine, because first of all, what that does is it allows you to explain your values. Your kids want to know what you believe in. Okay? But the problem is you have to be consistent with it, which is the hardest thing. Okay? But it's a nice discussion as a family. What are your values? What do you find is important? What do you find is abhorrent? And then what are the consequences if we agree on this when those rules are broken? Let the kids come up with their own things. For teenagers, we're off subject because I would like to be invited next year and we can talk about teenagers because that's a whole nother discussion. We can't do teenagers in 10 minutes. No way. The last thing is an interesting concept. If natural consequences occur, that's often enough. So, the kid who burns his finger on the stove is not going to touch the stove. You don't have to punish them for touching the stove. They punish themselves, Does that hurt? Oh, that hurts because you touched the stove. You're not going to touch the stove anymore. And read it. It says it all. The more you spank, the more you spank. So don't spank, because it escalates. The same with yelling. The more you yell, because you have to yell louder to get the same reaction. So don't do it if you can help it. Also, the last thing I think is important, if you teach your children that when you're mad, you hit. That's what they're going to do to other people too, right? So lots of reasons not to do that. So what about when you go to the pediatrician or the family doc? Do you find that is often a rushed encounter? So how do you make that not rushed so that you can actually bring these issues up? Because we're talking in generalities, but your kid that the doctor knows since birth is doing this, and we need to figure out what to do about it. How do you do it?
I always tell all my parents to like start thinking maybe a week before their appointment and start
Mhm.
writing everything down and take that piece of paper in
Yes.
there with you.
And what do you say to the doctor? The piece of paper's here, the doc's running around, the beeper's going off, the nurse is saying there's a family on the phone in line 2. How do you focus?
I ask them to, I say, look at your piece of paper. If there are questions you haven't answered, or sometimes hand the piece of paper to them and have them.
Here's what you say. You say, I know you're really busy, but this is our yearly physical. Can you please sit down and go through these questions with me? Acknowledge the busyness. Sitting down makes you actually sit down. You can't run around when you're sitting down. Can you please sit down with me and go over these things? The truth is, for your yearly physical, the heart stays the same. It was the same last year. It was the same the year before. The belly feels the same. The teenagers may have some pubic hair, but it's basically the same thing. So the purpose of that visit, oh God, it's on videotape. The purpose of that physical is not the physical. The purpose of that physical is to go over how things are going with that you and your child. And we don't have infectious diseases anymore, thank God. We have immunizations, so the 45-minute physical is 45 minutes, 35 of which you can actually talk about this behavioral stuff and get some ideas. And a good answer is, let's try something. That's a good outcome from that meeting. Because the doctors don't know, they don't live in your house, they don't know what styles you've done up to, they don't know your child that well. But a good answer would be, let's try something and get back to me. That's a good answer, a good outcome. If you get that outcome, it was a successful discussion. Good? Anything else? All right, so this was the one and only time these two were together in Houston, because he's in Brooklyn, she's in Houston, and they're busy families, so that's them sitting together watching Paw Patrol. That's it. How we do? We have time for questions.